Happy Tuesday, yo. Welcome to What If I Told You? And it's Jason coming at you here. And what if I told you that you could go to Norway right now and immigrate with no passport and no visa, and you could live there, and as long as you had a job, you could immigrate there with no other red tape. Well, this is the story of the Arctic archipelago called Svalbard. Svalbard, of course, is 700 miles north of the Norwegian mainland, and it's just a few hundred miles south of the North Pole. For latitudes purposes, the main settlement of Svalbard is at 78 degrees north. Svalbard is an archipelago. The main island is called Spitsbergen, and the main settlement on that island is called Longyearbyen. And Longyearbyen is actually Norwegian for Longyear City, and Longyear is the founder of the town and also an American. John Munro Longyear created the settlement and set up mining in Svalbard in around 1905 or 1906. Now, the reason why Svalbard is an international open zone is courtesy of a document called the Svalbard Treaty, which was signed in 1920. And it was signed by almost every recognized country in the world at the time. So any signatory of this particular document or treaty has rights to use the island, anywhere in the island chain, for economic gain. The one thing that nobody can do there is build military or have military forces stationed there. So it is entirely a civilian archipelago, and by international treaty, you can't use it for military purposes, similar to Antarctica, similar terms. Now, one other thing that the Svalbard Treaty allows for any country who's a signatory of this treaty, which is almost everybody, is open immigration. Now, I said that you don't need a visa or a passport to visit there, which is legally true. However, from a practical standpoint, you actually do need a visa to get there. So just to be able to reach the island chain, you will need a visa, and the reason being that transit to Svalbard does run through Oslo, Norway. And so you could take any one of a number of international flights to the Gardermoen airport in Oslo, and then transfer to a SAS National Norwegian airline flight from Oslo to Longyearbyen. And there's usually one or two nonstop flights per day between the two, which is remarkable because Longyearbyen's population is only about 2,500 people, maybe a little bit more than that now. And the entire archipelago only has about 3,000 people on it. And you're thinking, what makes this archipelago inhabitable at that high of a latitude? It's very simple. It's the same thing that makes the rest of Norway habitable, and it's the North Atlantic Current. So the Gulf Stream comes up from the Gulf of Mexico in the United States, or the Gulf of America, depending on what you want to call it these days. But it brings a blanket of warmth into the western coast of the Scandinavian countries, specifically Norway, and it does bring a warming effect. Now, would you ever use a bathing suit in Longyearbyen or Svalbard? Absolutely not. It's not that warm. But it is enough to keep the ports ice-free year-round. And it means the runway is pretty, for that latitude anyways, relatively easy to navigate. So landing planes, as challenging as it can be with some of the more turbulent weather in the region, you're not talking about feet of snow piled up on runways either. In fact, the Svalbard archipelago, as far as precipitation is concerned, is relatively semi-arid. And so the island chain or archipelago is, according to the Svalbard Treaty, technically a part of Norway as far as sovereignty is concerned. However, the Svalbard Treaty governs economic activities on the island chain. This is why Svalbard, and Spitsbergen in particular, actually does have a Russian settlement. It's called Barentsburg, with a population of maybe about 500 people these days. And it still has active mining activities in Barentsburg. And it is a Russian settlement, has a Russian embassy, uses Russian rubles, and it has Russian economic activities. What it doesn't have, of course, is the Red Army, for reasons I explained at the top. Svalbard is also normally a launching point for any expeditions to the North Pole, for obvious reasons, because of its high latitude. And excuse me, Longyearbyen ceased being a mining town a long time ago. I want to say probably been about 30 years. And it's kind of a tourist town these days. You know, that part of the island has fjords and notable mountains. And Longyearbyen kind of has the look of a kind of a ski village, minus the ski areas. Longyearbyen and that part of Svalbard also has a very unique feature. It's called the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, or the Doomsday Vault as it's called. This facility stores seeds of all species and types in the world. And the purpose of the seed vault is to have seed stock on hand in the case of a global apocalypse of some kind, whether that's man-made or not. And would allow replanting of the planet, if you will, for crops, for vegetation, and for other purposes. So almost every species of plant life is housed in the seed vault. It is buried underneath 700 feet of permafrost. And what this does is it protects the seeds at a temperature of barely above freezing naturally. There's no refrigeration or powering required to maintain the stock of the seed vault. Now, getting into this place is about as difficult as getting into NORAD in Colorado Springs, which of course is the kind of the doomsday military facility of the United States outside of Colorado Springs. Built inside of Cheyenne Mountain, the Svalbard Global Seed Vault is also built inside of permafrost. Permafrost, if you don't already know, is ground that never thaws. And the top levels do thaw. When it does thaw in the freeze-thaw cycle of the upper levels of this do create cracking and shifting of ground, which means that therefore almost every structure in Longyearbyen and most of the archipelago has to be built on stilts that go deep into the ground, which means that the freezing and thawing of the upper level of ground will not cause these structures to collapse. This is also a feature that's required in most settlements in Siberia, which includes the coldest city in the world of Yakutsk. Probably more on that in a different episode for sure, because that's a place that's always fascinated me. But Longyearbyen and Svalbard are a very unique economic zone. And now you're wondering, Who enforces the laws and the rules of this on behalf of the Norwegian sovereign government? That is a person that is a civil servant who is appointed. In Norwegian, it's called the Sysselmannen, or otherwise in English, the governor of Svalbard. The governor of Svalbard, according to the treaty, if somebody arrives and they are not able to sustain themselves economically, they will kick you off. They will kick your ass off the island. Visa or no visa. You have to have secured financial support for yourself before you arrive. Therefore, the town of Longyearbyen, with its 2,600 residents, has no homeless people. Another interesting part of the archipelago is because of this permafrost, cemeteries are impossible to build or have function, because the permafrost will preserve bodies to the point where they don't decay. It is for this reason that it is illegal to actually die on the island. If you are in a situation where you are in mortally in danger medically, you will be helicoptered to the mainland, because you cannot be buried on Svalbard. Now, if you're wondering what kind of a place Longyearbyen really is, as I said before, it's kind of a tourist, kind of a ski resort type village without the ski resort, because it doesn't have a ski resort. There are 5-star hotels in this town. There is a Radisson Polar Hotel in this town. There is a place called Base Camp Spitsbergen, another 5-star hotel on this island. As you could probably figure, being a tourist and going here is not all that cheap. It's not cheap to live there either, because almost everything as far as produce is concerned needs to be flown in. However, the unique thing about Svalbard economically is that if you're a tourist, you can go there and buy whatever you want craft-wise, which the town has a lot of craftsmen, and you can bring it back duty-free. Svalbard, by the Norwegian government, is a duty-free island. Now, would you pay a tariff when you get back to your home country? Possibly. But to buy these types of goods there is less expensive than it is in the rest of Norway. So, now, in case you're wondering what kind of people move there, scientists, for obvious reasons, it's a focal point of climate change studies, being as close to the North Pole as it is, and the effect of climate change and global warming on that particular climate. The weather in the summertime is decent, 40s and 50s for highs is about the norm. In the wintertime, it doesn't even really get below zero that often. It can, but it doesn't. And I'm talking Fahrenheit. Normally teens, maybe 20s in the wintertime. The other thing about being this far north, of course, is that in the wintertime, you have about 90 days of polar night where the sun doesn't rise. Likewise, in the summertime, in June, May, June, and July, you likewise have similar time frame where the sun doesn't set. So going to sleep there at night in the summer season is a stiff challenge, to say the least. But the people that go there, scientists, mining doesn't occur anymore in Longyearbyen, but it does occur on the Russian side in Barentsburg. There's also one other town on the archipelago that's actually considered to be the northernmost settlement of any kind in the world, and that's Ny-Ålesund, or New Ålesund. That place only has a population of about 70 people, and it's entirely a scientific village. It's on the northern tip of Spitsbergen, and it's considered to be the northernmost inhabited settlement of any kind in the world. The northernmost functional town of any kind in the world is Longyearbyen. It's got the northernmost airport, of course, the northernmost of almost everything. Northernmost university, it does have a university for studying, so students do go there. It's called the University Center of Svalbard. And there are actually dormitories on the northern edge of Longyearbyen, with dorms, northernmost dorm rooms in the world. Has the northernmost ATMs in the world. Those hotels that I mentioned about are the northernmost hotels in the world, which includes the Radisson SAS, which is the northernmost hotel in the world. The northernmost paved roads in the world are also in and around the town of Longyearbyen. There are no roads connecting the other settlements in Svalbard. And as you can probably figure, in an Arctic climate like this, the most common method of transporting yourself between the settlements is snowmobile. And here's another requirement for leaving town. If you leave the settlement of Longyearbyen, or any of the other settlements for that matter, you're required to leave with a rifle. Because it is said on Svalbard that people are merely the guests. The real rulers of the islands are the polar bears. There are signs warning of polar bears on the outskirts of the towns all over the archipelago. And so you've always got warnings, and that's a requirement whether you are a visitor or whether you are a native. You are required to carry a rifle in order to leave Longyearbyen, Barentsburg, or New Alsand. This is a place with some really, really fascinating rules. The anti-gun movement would not fly in this place. Neither would the anti-fur movement, for that matter, because as relatively mild as it is for its latitude, there are strong winds because of the variables in jet patterns coming in and out. It does create a very windy environment, and the little snow they do get does get flown around quite a bit. So even if the temperatures are in the teens, the wind chills can still be well below zero. It can still be 20 to 30, even 40 below Fahrenheit. So the anti-fur crowd or the animal rights crowd would basically be told to fly a kite if they can hold on to it in this weather, in the wind. I'm pretty sure kite flying is not a very common hobby in Longyearbyen. Try to fly a kite there, it's going to snap, and it's probably going to blow all the way back to mainland Russia, which would be east of there. Or if it doesn't at least get that far, at least gets to Sweden or Finland. So yes, you can get there actually by cruise ship, so you could get there without a visa or a passport, but it's very difficult to do, and cruise ships do stop in Longyearbyen, but they're not as a primary form of transport. They are Arctic cruises for tourist purposes. And so Longyearbyen, being an ice-free port, does have a port. And so some of those goods can be shipped in, but even that's not cheap for the local populace. The one native food source that the archipelago does have plenty of, that you probably would not surprise you in the least, is fish. Native cuisine involves lots and lots and lots of kinds of fish. And the experience of eating the native cuisine does involve a lot of fish. And the restaurants in those hotels that I mentioned about, the 5-star ones, well, you're going to get a lot of fish and seafood dishes. I would love to visit this place sometime in my lifetime. Being that I'm now 53 years old, the time is running a little bit short. But it is a fascinating place, And you can go without a passport or a visa. There are a fair number of even Westerners who have immigrated there. And they all say usually the same thing. They came for a job. They came thinking that they'd be there for, 4 or 5, 6 months. And they wind up spending 20 years there because they just love the place so much. Because it's so peaceful, so quiet. And the biggest danger to your safety, crime is practically non-existent on the islands. Your biggest threat, of course, is the polar bears. But violent crime is non-existent in Svalbard. Theft is uncommon. It's occasional. But beyond that, it is almost unheard of. The town of Longyearbyen does have a jail, but it often goes years and years without ever being used. There's no reason to ever hold anybody in custody because nobody ever breaks the law to that extent there. There are many numerous museums in Longyearbyen dedicated to the Arctic. And those are must-sees. There's also a camp where you can camp outdoors at 78 degrees north. That's actually the name of it. It's 78 degrees camp in Longyearbyen. Compared to most hotels on the island, it's the most economic way to go. But you would need a very thick blanketing and a very strong tent to deal with the winds. Thick blankets, unless you're there in July, when the temperatures are reasonably tolerable. And this is Spitsbergen is the main island of the archipelago. It's not the only island in the archipelago, of course. There's another island called Bear Island, which is halfway between Spitsbergen and the Norwegian mainland, that has no residents, but has tours and is very interesting in its own right. Brønnøya is what it's called in Norwegian, but Bear Island is the English name of it. If you are taking a ship or a cruise between the Norwegian mainland and Longyearbyen or Svalbard, or the rest of Svalbard, that is a potential stop-off point, with its sheer cliffs overlooking the North Sea. So anyway, this is the longest one of mine yet. Hopefully you had a good Tuesday, and this is going to probably take some time for me to upload, but once I do, I hope you enjoyed it. And so this is today about the world's northernmost inhabited place, and a place you can immigrate to without a passport and without a visa. An open international land under Norwegian sovereignty, but governed by an international treaty that countries even such as North Korea have signed. I've never heard of any North Koreans being sent there, but Russians, of course, have the run of the north part of the island, and Longyearbyen is truly an international community because the scientists, the few people who help run the seed vault, and just everybody else involved with the business of running this archipelago and being basically a capital town. So anyhow, that is the story of Svalbard. Tomorrow I have not decided what I'm going to come back with, but as usual it'll be fun. You folks have a great Tuesday night. Peace out, homies.